government breakfast. It's with a little sadness in my heart that I welcome everybody, because today is the first government breakfast in the past 34 years that I haven't been a member of city government. But it was a good thing that I am now retired. To start off the morning's festivities, and before I acknowledge the presence of my former colleagues in city government, I'd like to call upon the president of the Chelsea Chamber of Commerce, Joe Mahoney, to give the official welcome. You can do it right from there. There's no
welcome. I must say, though, I'm the acting president. And one of the things I'd like to tell all city people, actually everybody in this room, if I am president, would like to engage everybody in this room to help this great city become even greater. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The difference between the president and the acting president is only 7%. I have a list, and it's difficult without a podium, so I have to hold the list in my hand. Our executive director, Rich Cuthey. Where is Rich? Rich, good morning. Rich is the one that keeps the chamber together, runs our day-to-day operation, and did a phenomenal job helping pack this former fire station. Rich, thank you very much. Rich has given me the list of members of city and state government to introduce, so if I leave anybody off, please yell at Rich. It wasn't me that did it. And as I always say, but for those that are newer to our attendance, hold your applause until the end, because we don't want one person to get any more applause than anybody else. Because sometimes somebody says, boy, he got more of this than I did. So we're going to wait till the end. So, not in any particular order, but I would like to start off by acknowledging the presence in our city manager, acquiesced from speaking this morning. He said, you do enough talking for me, so I don't have to say anything, but I would like to introduce and ask him to stand our city manager, Tom Ambrosino. He's the only one that gets it. Did you notice he didn't get much? So my concern is, now when I introduce State Representative Dan Ryan, if he gets more of an applause than the city manager, I don't want him to feel bad. So I'm assuming that State Representative Dan Ryan is in attendance. City Councilor Leo Robinson, City Councilor Joe Pernatola, Fire Chief Len Albanese, Police Chief Brian Kaj could not be with us this morning, but he wanted to send his regards to everybody. Dr. Mary Burke, Superintendent of Schools, Luis Prado, Director of Health and Human Services, Mary Lou Island, Director of Assessing, Bert Taverna, Director of Public Works, Diane Carey, Director of Human Resources, Michael McAteer, Director of Inspectional Services, Dylan Cook, our Chief Procurement Officer, Paul Casino, the City Council Clerk, Rosemary Carlisle from the School Committee, and although he's not a member of city government, he is every part of our city, and that is Hank Shaw, the Chief Officer of the Boston FBI Office. Oh, Roy, City Council Roy Albertonino. See, you got your own name. Before we go into the next phase, I'd like to call upon Steve Taco from Encore, who wants to say just a couple of words about a business development program.
So my father's unavailable. Sorry, we're doing it. John. Just quickly, today, actually after this, from 10 to 12, we're kicking off our local vendor procurement series. You may have seen it in the Chelsea paper and all the local papers. There's a whole series of events. Rich has all the information that's available on our website as well. Today's event is specifically targeted at facilities and maintenance. So if you're a supplier or if you're a vendor of anything related to maintenance of our facilities, cleaning supplies, all that sort of stuff, today's a good event. We'll also do another facilities and maintenance event later on in the month. We want to get through that entire series in October because we're opening at the end of June of next year, which is coming up quickly, and we need to start buying things, buying a lot of things. So, and we're on our own, we're doing our best to sort of get out. We're building up our procurement team. We're turning over every stone, and we're working with Durkin companies. I just want to name a couple Chelsea companies, good veteran-owned business in the facilities world that Dan Durkin is doing some work with us. We're also next week going to see Duffy, a recently relocated cigar and candy company that moved from Charlestown into Chelsea, and so we're going to see them to sell some of the tobacco products and some of the other things. So we're doing our best to get out there on our own. To the extent that you can come and offer some goods and services, please do. If you have friends that are in the area, they offer supplies and services, goods and services, please introduce them to us. We're also working with Mr. Ambrosino to kick off a job fair as well, and probably a series of events because we have to hire 4,800 people, which we're really excited about, but it's going to be a challenge with such slow unemployment. So whatever we can do collectively. Thank you.
Yeah, now I'm reading it. I put the glasses on. Earlier this year, the City of Chelsea and its partners, including the Chelsea Chamber of Commerce, were successful in their application for a transformative development initiative grant from the Mass Development, which is the Commonwealth's Economic Development and Finance Authority. Carlos Matos was selected as the FDI Fellow to work with the economic development here for the Chelsea downtown area. I'd like to ask Carlos to please stand just to be recognized.
I don't think he's made it here.
Oh.
Chef Mariana McCormick is
I'm here
here.
for Mass Development.
Welcome.
Yeah, no, it's a great opportunity, and we're really excited to work with Chelsea on that. So congratulations, it was a lot of work to get it.
Thank you very much. And I know this is not your first time attending a Chelsea.
No, this is one of my favorites.
Thank you so much. We do have some new members in the audience today. Harry Patel from Hellas Liquors, and he may be, I wouldn't call them new members of the chamber. They've been so active in the chamber, in the various businesses they've been in, have always been involved in the chamber. But it's so great to see Steve Haley and Gina Wanji from the Hilton Gardens.
Yay.
Beth McDougall from McDougall Architects, Craig Murphy from Cambridge Graphics, Joe Carrillo from El Porto Mexican Bar and Grill, and Lucky Saini from One Stop Liquors. Welcome. Well, starting off our speaking program is Michael Green. Michael Green leads the Climate Action Business Association, also known as CABA. I was in the CABA business for many years. Award-winning advocate for climate policy and environmental actions. Since 2012, he has served as a representative to the United Nations, focusing on international climate science and policy. Recognized as a chairperson of change by President Obama in 2016. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to call upon Michael.
Hey everybody, my name's Michael Green. I'm actually going to have my colleague Kristen up here as well with me, and she's going to talk with you guys also a little bit about the work that we've been doing this summer. So just out of a show of hands, and I didn't plan on doing this, how many people had someone come into their business this summer and start talking to them about sea level rise or rising sea and being prepared for it? Okay. If you're not raising your hands, that means we still have to talk with you. So definitely reach out to Tim, Kristen, or I. I want to tell you guys a little bit about our experience, what made us do the Businesses Acting on Rising Seas campaign, a little bit about the organization that I run, and then also hand it over to Kristen to talk a little bit about the data and what we've learned so far with going door to door and talking with businesses in Chelsea. But before I even start with that, I want to, of course, thank our host, the Chamber, for putting this event on. Thank you to Chelsea Station for having us in this awesome historic building. I've learned a lot about it in the 30 minutes that I've been here, so that's awesome. So we're going to get right into talking about us. We provide business leaders with the tools to take targeted action on climate change. There's a P in there and an R, I promise.
Not an IT company.
Not an IT company, although one of our first starting member businesses was one. Apparently didn't quite rub off. So, again, Row Carbon, so hopping right into a little bit about the work that we do. Mission and vision stuff is important, but get right to the nitty-gritty. What we're offering our member businesses, we help them in 3 ways. Helping them with their own internal sustainability and resiliency work, helping them understand the political and policy landscape. How do different policies interact with your business? What do they mean? And then also bringing together what we call our community of shared values. There's a lot of times that we get siloed off in the various industries or business types, and we don't come together to share best practices, find opportunities to work together. So every month we'll have 1 or 2 events focused on different topics, allowing our member businesses to come together, share ideas, learn from experts. We're actually in the Old West Church, another great historic building here in Boston, and Cambridge Street in downtown Boston. So it's a great meeting space, and I hope that we get to see some of your faces at our upcoming events there. So going to talk a little bit about the program, and this is probably a story that is familiar for everyone here. We hear about a week in advance that the storm's coming. If you're a true New Englander, you don't really adjust that much, right? They show the pictures of the stores getting emptied out and people going and buying shovels, but we already have all that stuff figured out. And we kind of hunker down. One day the snow starts coming, 2 days it's still picking up, and by that evening it starts to dwindle. What's the first thing you do? You go outside, you grab your shovel, let the dog out, whatever, and the first thing that always comes to my mind is how quiet the city is right after the storm. And you start to dig out, and then maybe you see your neighbor, and you dig out, the plow comes by and destroys all the work you just did, and then you dig out some more. But when you finally get out to the street, we all kind of walk down the middle of the street here in Boston and Chelsea. I've never quite figured that one out. I'm from upstate New York. We don't have sidewalks, I guess, to walk on. But we dig out, and as you start to walk around the neighborhood, you see that light on down the street. And you go into that little Ace Hardware, you go into that community bodega or that grocery store, you get a cup of coffee, you see some familiar faces, and the first thing that's going through your head is like, wow, what crazy people that their small business is open during the storm. And for you as small business owners, you know that there's a bunch of other logistics behind that, more than just the service that you're providing to the community, right? There's how is my staff getting here? How am I making sure that my products that they need to be delivered to customers or be delivered on site are able to get in? What are we able to provide that day, and dealing with the logistics of that? That's kind of like a teaching New England way to look at these issues in a lot of ways. There's situations like Hurricane Sandy, where those small businesses weren't just offering a cup of coffee and a familiar face, they were offering a place for someone to charge their cell phone so they could let their loved ones know that they're okay. Or in other cases, able to offer basic health or clean water supplies to the community. In a lot of instances, your small businesses are able to reach out to the community that surrounds them much quicker than emergency services or the city is able to act, right? So when we start thinking about, okay, what do we need to provide those small businesses with a plan, with information on how to be open during that storm, and then what is that service that they're able to provide to the community? So with our campaign, I think there's a couple of important things that we really wanted to focus on. When you start talking with other business owners about resiliency or preparing for extreme weather, the first thing that comes to mind is infrastructure and how do I make my building harder or more secure through the storm. Both of which are very capital intensive. And to be honest, what do we have time to plan for? Building a new wall around our brick and mortar, or dealing with the million other projects inside of it that require costs and require attention and pertain to the day-to-day of the business. So one of the things that we found is that and Kristen will get into this in a bit, so a lot of the businesses we spoke to just hadn't had that first conversation internally. For us, it actually it hit home. 3 winters ago, during President's Day weekend, I don't know if anybody remember this, but it was like the one wicked cold weekend that we had that winter. It dropped below 0 for 2 days in a row, and it was a long weekend. I came in on that Tuesday morning, and all of the ceiling tiles on my first floor of where our organization was being hosted had completely eroded and fallen onto everything, and I had about 2 inches of water on the floor. Well, the person 2 floors above me had put in a shower. They had left a window open in their bathroom. The shower wasn't done properly and to code, and a pipe burst. Because it was a long weekend, nobody was there at the facility, so there was no one to stop the damage. Right then and there, I had to come up with what's my plan. What am I telling my staff? What's our rally point? Where is any important documentation on site that could be water damage that I need to rescue? What about my printer, computers, hardware platforms, servers that are possibly sitting in water? Oh no, are all these things still plugged in? Should I not be standing in this water? There's a lot of things right then and there that I had to figure out. So the goal of this campaign is really to help the businesses that we're going door to door and speaking with to make sure that they have this kind of a plan in place, and also where are they getting their information going forward. So with that, actually, I know that we are tight on time. I'm going to actually pass it over to Kristen, who has really been leading the effort. 2 years ago, we reached out to 500 businesses across 19 different communities in coastal Massachusetts that were high risk. This year, we decided rather than reach out to a large bucket of businesses and disseminate as much information, we really wanted to create opportunities where we can interact, things like this breakfast, and really build a relationship with you guys so that way we can move the conversation forward even further. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris.
Great. So this slide kind of highlights our engagement so far with our Businesses Acting on Rising Seas campaign. And as Michael said, a big part of the campaign this year and our engagement in Chelsea was learning about local stories. So as you can see, very familiar images that we've all lived through here in Chelsea, and that is why we decided to come to Chelsea. Looking at maps, we found that 35% of the city is within the potential coastal flooding area by 2070. A few pictures of our engagement. You'll recognize a few familiar faces as well. Just a little thank you to our volunteer student fellows and staff. And then here's a little bit about the Chelsea businesses we engaged with. We engaged with quite a spectrum. Retailers, funeral homes, laundromats, car washes. We really wanted to talk to a number of leaders here on the ground to determine climate risks and really prepare the local community. Also another familiar faces. And then a big part of our Businesses Acting on Rising Seas campaign is the local story aspect and speaking with leaders to determine what climate risks are. So here's an example of when we spoke with Mark here at Chelsea Station, and he talked about his concerns with flooding and how it may affect his supplies in the basement. So that ties in with our resilience guide, which I see a few of you have. Please feel free to pick up one by the door. It highlights 8 simple, low-cost steps for businesses to take action. And so that's what we talked about with Mark that day. Another one, Roy here in the audience is really talking about connecting, using, storms, electrical outages, and how he's connecting the dots with climate change impacts and the importance of bringing that to the entire community. A few more familiar faces. And then another quote from Miguel at Designer's Choice, The Florist on Marginal, really talking about how we just came through a beautiful summer and we're not thinking about these prepared measures, and this is really the time to look at your emergency plan and look to the winter. A few more pictures. And then so a little bit of our findings, a little quick recap summary. We really found that speaking with businesses in Chelsea, they're mostly really concerned about employees not being able to get to work when these extreme weather events are happening, flooding events, looking at the infrastructure, their supply chain that we talked about. And just in general, we found that businesses here in Chelsea, over 75% of businesses rate their extreme weather and climate change risk to be about a 7. So there really is a need to spread this information around. And kind of going off of that, in speaking with businesses, we asked them, what is stopping you from doing more to begin preparing for these extreme weather events, for the winter storms? And it really is, almost 90% said it was lack of information, as well as cost. And so what we found is about 23% of the businesses here in town had an emergency plan looking into the winter, while over 90% of businesses were negatively affected from those really crazy 100-year storms, which only will be increasing in the future. And so what we found with our Businesses Acting on Rising Seas campaign is the more businesses that have an emergency plan, the less the negative impacts that we found. And so we also have found that there is real leadership here in the Chelsea business community looking at sustainable action practices already. We've gotten started. And business leaders here are already really acting to reduce their energy use, to recycle. Over 85% of businesses we spoke with, looking at energy efficiency upgrades, encouraging their staff to bike and walk to work, looking at a low carbon future. And then we also, one of our major questions is, what would help you do more? What do you need to look to the future to be more successful? And so that's, continuing with state and town support, resources and tools for generators and water, state funding.
And so, where are we going next with this is, what we're thinking about planning for moving forward. There's two parts. First, with a lot of the businesses that we've started the conversation with, we want to continue the conversation. And we're slowly going to be able to move, hopefully, from, okay, what is your threats? You'll see on the guides it actually has a flood map of Chelsea. You probably wouldn't be surprised. But there's a fair amount of businesses who are looking at that map when we're at their counter for the first time. So going over and getting that initial information out, we're going to continue to do that work. But then how do we continue to evolve that conversation? We're really happy to be partnering with our great friends at Green Roots, Chelsea, who we've actually gone into thinking about what does microgrids and real resiliency infrastructure and hardware projects look like for the community, and how can we start to participate and move those forward as well. So education is key, but we also need to give some real actionable items to help not just the small business community, but also the larger community that they're dependent upon. A small business closes their doors, and who moves in, or does that building go vacant? It creates a lot of uncertainty for the community. It never does good things for that community fabric. So we're really excited to be working in Chelsea. We're really excited to be continuing to do this outreach. And one of the next steps that you'll hopefully be seeing is a lot of the stories, the interviews, the media that we've collected over this summer, we're going to start turning into video and other content that we can share with media and really get out there. Because too often in this country do we think of climate change impacting communities over there. And most of the times that community over there is somewhere on the other side of the world. This month it just so happens to be down south in the Carolinas. But from the time we noticed Hurricane Sandy on the map with meteorologists to the time it made landfall was 9 days. So if you're going to take anything away from this, it's let's create a plan, because we really don't have a lot of time, and it's only a matter of luck and circumstances until a storm hits here in Boston. So with that, thank you. Turn it back over to our wonderful MCs and look forward to the rest of the speaking portion.
All right, to save time, you can just turn your heads this way. Thank you very much, Michael and Kristen. And you said 2 words that really rang a bell with me, and something that I've been practicing in the city for 34 years, and that's emergency planning. So, having said that, I'd now like to call upon the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Dan Singer, who currently serves as the Assistant Secretary for that agency. Prior to that, Daniel was the Chief of Staff of the Department of Environmental Protection. Before the DEP, he spent several years assisting in the oversight of Massachusetts' 4 environmental agencies, as Special Assistant to the Undersecretary of Environment. Dan is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts, Boston. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to call upon Dan Singer.
Thanks. Thanks for having me this morning. Appreciate the Chamber for hosting this event. I actually am here standing in on behalf of Secretary Beaton, who was looking forward to some of this event this morning. Unfortunately, the Secretary has been responsible for the state side of the response and management of the gas crisis going on in the Merrimack Valley. So there's a lot on his plate this morning, and asked me to step in on his behalf. But I'm happy to come and talk a little bit about what we're doing on the state side of things when dealing with response to climate change and working with local communities like yours and the businesses that support them. And I think that this room is representative of a great partnership for advancing these issues like climate change. When you're dealing with this on a local level, both having the city officials who deal with this and the business owners who keep the city thriving, and that their interaction with folks on the state level is really pivotal to advancing our resilience and our response to this issue. So I'm really, really happy to join you guys this morning. So I think the previous speakers from CABA did a great job of pointing out a lot of the hazards and a lot of the issues that we're facing now when it comes to climate change. We see a lot of impacts statewide. Everybody from the Berkshires to the Cape is being impacted by different issues, via coastal flooding or increased heat days, inland flooding. We're seeing an increase in nor'easters last year. We're seeing an increase in summer, hot summer days over 90 degrees. That's only going to go more and more by the end of the century. I can't tell you how many people I've seen in the past month that said, "Hey, how's your summer?" And the first thing they talk about is how hot it's been. So, I think that we're living this stuff, day to day. And I think one of the other great points that the previous speakers made was about how the key to success here is having a good plan and putting that into place. And I think that's what we've been really trying to focus on from the state level, working with our partners in the community, and have been able to do some good work with the city of Chelsea over the past year. So, recognizing that we're dealing with all sorts of different levels of government sizes, geography, different landscapes statewide, we recognized starting last year that we really needed to take an approach to planning for climate change and resilience that was able to be transferable from one town, a small town in Western Mass, to a big city in Eastern Boston. And so that's what we started, was this municipal vulnerability grant program back in the spring of 2017. And that was to really say, let's get into these local communities. Let's help train the officials within those communities to work with their business leaders, work with their residents, and figure out what the steps that they need to take to become more resilient and adapt to these issues are. And so in the first year, we were able to get 20% of the towns across the state to sign up to this program. In the second year, we were happy to include Chelsea, and are now up to about 45% of the cities and towns across the state. And the key has really been to go in and train the local officials and train the community to work on this, but also at the end of the day to have a comprehensive plan for one city and town that matches up with the same type of plan we have for another city or town. from the state perspective, I think that, you know, we can't have a situation where one person's playing Tetris, the other person's playing Jenga. You know, we really need to have a uniform plan that when we put all the pieces together, we have a sort of statewide, comprehensive adaptation and resiliency plan. So we got that program started back in 2017. I've seen increasing success over the past few years. In conjunction with some of our partners in the legislature, including Representative Ryan and the rest of your legislative delegation, the administration was able to pass a $2.1 billion environmental bond bill this past year, and a lot of the authorizations in that are going to go towards what will be the next step in our municipal vulnerability planning process. So the first step is the plan, and Chelsea worked with our office this past spring to put together that plan, and I think that a lot of the key things that were identified by folks that worked on that are issues that we're seeing sort of in the metro Boston area at large. You have, you know, I was just told this morning that you're surrounded 80% by water, which I would have thought was pretty high, but I think this would be 80%. You know, you have an extensive amount of impervious surface, a lot of developed areas, so lack of tree cover, some inland, you know, tributaries that run through here. So, you know, those are a lot of the type of climate vulnerability risks that we're seeing play out in sort of the metro area. So, working closely with the city, those were identified and laid out into a plan. And, you know, a plan's great, so what's the next step? So we, you know, as part of this bond bill that we passed last summer, this past summer, and as part of what was rolled out last week by a conjunction of Energy and Environmental Affairs with MEMA, the emergency planning folks, we now have a statewide hazard and climate mitigation plan, which traditionally is done by the emergency management folks on I think every 5-year basis to unlock federal funding through FEMA, but this is the first time that we've actually merged the energy and environmental people and the emergency management people and said, we're all actually trying to get at some of the same stuff here when it comes to climate change and resilience. So why don't we integrate this planning and lock it in and make sure that we're doing the best that we can to support our cities and towns around the Commonwealth. So that was rolled out last week, which laid out about 100 different action items that can be taken by the state, working with cities and towns to deal with hazards, both of, you know, natural causes, climate related, and public safety issues as they arise. So using that, using the bond bill that has a $100 million authorization for climate change specifically, about 70-something of which is dedicated to advancing the municipal vulnerability grant program. We're looking forward to taking cities and towns like Chelsea and moving them from the plan level to the action level. So coming up this next year, this fall, Chelsea will be eligible for a municipal vulnerability program action grant, which is looking at some of the items that were laid out in the planning process, figuring out what are, you know, the top 2 or 3 that need to be addressed first, and getting money to the city to take those on. So, you know, we see this as an iterative process. We see this as a partnership with the communities, and within the community, we see that as a partnership with both their residents and their business leaders and everybody that's here at the table today. So happy to be able to come and talk to you guys a little bit about this. We're excited for the work that's going on here in Chelsea and statewide, and we look forward to working with all of you to keep this going forward. And so I think, I don't know if we're doing questions or...
You got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I'm happy to take 3 minutes worth of questions if folks have them.
That bonding money, any of that going to be used for taking walls around some of the cities like Chelsea and East Boston?
Yeah, so the entire bill is $2.1 billion, which is all kind of bonding authorizations that are laid out in different categories. So 100 million or so are climate related issues. We have a number, so on top of just the municipal vulnerability program, we have a number of different grant programs within our secretariat and then kind of government-wide that deal with a number of different responses for, you know, either climate change or safety hazards and stuff. So you know, something like that would certainly fall into one of those categories. I think through, you know, the planning processes that are going on, folks are really trying to look at, you know, is that the best, is would something like that be the best option to secure a place like Chelsea, using the funding that's available? So I think that something like that would be an option that would sort of fall into that. But I think as the plans progress, we'll see kind of what that money ends up directed to specifically.
Have there been any studies done on the depth, the height of those walls, what type of material they should use, besides maybe concrete?
I know, there's obviously a lot of studies going on for sea level rise and how to address that. I'm not sure about, anything that's done specifically for kind of a wall structure in this area, but certainly happy to look into that.
I think that's pretty important. That's like number one on everybody's calendar.
Yeah, I know the city of Boston has done a study that looked at, is it feasible or possible to put some sort of flood barrier across the outer harbor, and that, on top of being just astronomically expensive, has some serious ecological repercussions, and didn't actually, solve some of the issues at hand. But I know one of the things that's really being studied by both the state and the city now is, are there ways to use kind of existing islands and stuff like that in the harbor to break, storm surge and stuff as it comes in. So it's certainly a thing that the folks are spending a lot of time looking into right now. All right, one more? Or?
Yeah, sure, one more. 30 seconds.
My name is Sergio Cardona. I'm a Chelsea resident. And what I would like to do is maybe a suggestion. It's about language, because last November I went to a meeting about energy. About 40 of us went to the Energy Facility Siting Board, and there was no interpretation into Spanish. And the same is happening here, and so I would like to know about how Chelsea residents and our communities can be informed about the projects.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and something that has been brought to my attention through some of the folks at Green Roots here in Chelsea. We were fortunate enough to sit down and have a discussion about this a few weeks ago. I think that getting to a community is obviously a very imperative part of that, is accessing the community in the language that they understand, and getting to them in a means that actually reaches the population there. So I think that we have a long way to go from the state side to do a much better job at doing that. And in order to actually work with populations, we need to be able to communicate with populations. And that's certainly one of the big things when it comes to dealing with this municipal vulnerability program. I should say that one of the whole components of it is dealing with environmental justice neighborhoods like Chelsea and ensuring that stuff like translation is available. So I recognize the issue that occurred at the DPU several months ago, and it's certainly something that I personally would like to rectify and fix, and we're taking a lesson learned from.
And just also maybe to add to that, we did make our guides in Spanish as well. We're doing our best as well to try and make sure that all the communities that we reach out to, that business owners can understand the information we're trying to get to them.
Before our speakers sit down, we have 2 more items before we wrap up the program. We're going to run about 5 minutes late. The city manager said to those people in city government, you can use 5 minutes of tomorrow's lunch hour. We have a raffle. We actually have 3 raffles. We have 2 raffle tickets for our annual Pot of Gold, which is October what, so? 17th. October 17th at Anthony's in Malden. It's the largest fundraiser that the chamber does. The grand prize is $10,000, and it's also a themed party, Halloween theme. So if anybody has any interest, especially if you don't win one of the 2 raffle tickets, give Rich Cuffey a call at the chamber office for more information and for tickets. Gina, we have 2 raffles to figure out for Pot of Gold. I'd like to ask our guest speakers to pull the tickets. He doesn't know anybody here, so no collusion. You can read the number.
169-843. 169.
Mary Lou Island.
Hey.
And the next ticket is
169-856.
856. Yes, President Joe Dodd. And we have one $100 gift card for Chelsea Station.
Thank you, Joe.
No, I don't want it.
I'll split the gift card. 169-845.
169-845.
Well done.
I'd like to call upon our acting president, who gets 5% less than the full president, to make a presentation to our guest speakers, which will end the program. And ladies and gentlemen, a very sincere thank you to all of you for attending. Hope to see a good number of you at our annual Pot of Gold, and I will see some of you back at City Hall. President Joe.
Just before I give the awards, I'd like to just mention that what they speak about is very near and dear to me, because I showed them at the table here a building permit within the town of Braintree, and it said erect solar panels on roof. Our house back in
1980.
we had solar panels on our roof. So, I mean, again, Mahoney, it's a green name. I kissed the Blarney Stone, but this is near and dear to us. And anything and everything that these folks say should be taken with more than just a grain. Take advantage of it.
Okay. You may explain something. One for each. We'll take one out of the block and we'll take the other.
It's not digital, I can't read it. Oh, thank you. Hey, that was an acknowledgement to the lady that started Green. She is a very smart lady. This is from Chelsea Clark, the preeminent world clock maker. Is that correct, Bruce? Thank you so much. And again, the little magic box.
One final thank you. I was remiss earlier in not thanking our sponsor for this morning's breakfast, Encore, and I'd like to thank John Taco, representative.